I would move that House File 91 be recommended to be re-referred to the Ways and Means Committee.
And Chair Hansen, I understand that you have an author's amendment. Will you move that Ea2 amendment and provide a brief explanation for us?
Madam Chair, I would like to actually take testimony before the amendment because we may have, we've had some recent information that I think will be presented that may be needed to revise the amendment. So if we could dispense with, delay, not dispense, but delay the Ea2 amendment and maybe move right into the bill and then get some testimony.
Sure, yep, we can do that, Chair Hansen, if you want to proceed, whether that's you want to give a brief overview or move right into testimony, go ahead.
Members, I'll start with some, thanks, Madam Chair, start with some brief testimony. This is the third bill in front of the committee that deals with some unfinished business from the last legislative session. This committee has grappled with how to deal with cleanups with dry cleaners for some time, and we have had ongoing legislation both in 19 and then in 20. As a result of the 19 legislation, we actually reached a compromise agreement between the Pollution Control Agency, the House, the Senate, and the Dry Cleaners Association. That agreement was included in the omnibus package at the end of session, and we did try to pass it out individually during several of the special sessions, but that did not happen. And so when the magic hour of the fiscal year ending on June 30th, 2020, the agreement disappeared. What I am attempting to do in House File 91 is to try to salvage some components of that agreement. And that agreement was somewhat comprehensive, but there are things that in that past agreement that cannot occur right now because both time and money have moved on. So what I'm attempting to do in this bill, and we'll hear more from the amendment, is to keep the components that were included in the bill where we would make sure that those dry cleaners, those small businesses, those owner operators that have dry cleaners who are paying into a fund, but also have cleanup from perchlorate that is used in the dry cleaning industry, not with every dry cleaner, but with some dry cleaners, to use that, make sure that they are getting reimbursed for the expenses that occur for cleanup. When this system was set up 30 years ago, there were a lot more dry cleaners, and the fee that was applied to those dry cleaners to keep money in the fund for those cleanups was lower because there were more dry cleaners. Now there are fewer dry cleaners, and I think you'll hear from the Dry Cleaners Association that the fees have gone up, and there was a backlog of cleanups because there were not the funds to pay for those cleanups. We want to make sure we're getting those cleanups to occur. In addition, we had testimony last year where there's new equipment that in the city of Minneapolis, they have transitioned off of PERC and have the equipment to do dry cleaning without PERC. And so we would use a model elsewhere, often in agriculture where we have cost share. We would take funds and use them for cost share to help pay the cost of transitioning the equipment into non-PERC dry cleaning equipment. And then finally, we would have a ban on PERC. Obviously, COVID hit. There was money that was appropriated in 2019, $600,000 to look at a legal way of looking at doing a legal analysis to see if there were funds available through insurance policies with the dry cleaners. That report was just completed by the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, and there is about roughly $255,000 unexpended from that those funds. So in general, what I'm trying to do here is to salvage what we can from that agreement to try to help out the dry cleaners, clean up contamination from PERC, and prevent future contamination by transitioning off of PERC and then having an ultimate ban. The amendment will clarify some of that based on existing information, and I think the testimony from the Pollution Control Agency and the dry cleaners will also assist. So I would defer to them.
Thank you, Chair Hansen. And I do have a couple of testifiers here on the agenda. If Mr. Un, I'm not sure if that's how you say your last name, from the Minnesota Cleaners Association, if he's here, if he'd be up next to testify.
Yep. Thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Keith Downey, and I volunteer my time as the president of the Minnesota Cleaners Association, and I'm the owner of East Metro Clean and Press. I would like to thank the committee for allowing this testimony today. While we had hoped to testify on the bill as previously introduced, we understand why it had to be amended. I do want to give you a little bit of background on the dry cleaners over the last year, 10 months specifically. The dry cleaners for the state of Minnesota are under extreme pressure to keep their doors open. Most dry cleaners revenue is down well over 50%, with some down over 80% since the pandemic started. We have many who are barely hanging on and are afraid that they cannot pay their bills and fees. We have already seen multiple dry cleaners close their doors for good. This bill will help address some of the issues that the dry cleaners face pertaining to the Dry Clean Fund, and also help the industry transition to more sustainable cleaning methods. One part of this bill prioritizes that dry cleaners get reimbursed first from the Dry Clean Fund. Putting the dry cleaner reimbursement first from the fund will help them immensely, as they may not have access to the resources they need to be able to pay for those cleanup costs up front. This bill also has in it a sunset date on the use of perchloroethylene, also known as PERC, as a dry cleaning method in the state of Minnesota. The Minnesota Cleaners Association estimates that there are only around 20 or so PERC machines left in the entire state of Minnesota. We were able to reach out to most of these owners, and most of them conveyed the message to us that they supported a ban on PERC as long as they have the financial help and enough time to swap out their PERC machines. Many of them were even enthusiastic they could even get some sort of help considering their current financial situation. However, with new machines costing well over $40,000 to $50,000 a piece, not including installation, many of these small owners who are left may not have the resources to be able to swap out these machines. Most of these are the smallest operators, and they are spread throughout the state of Minnesota. While it is possible there will be used machines on the market that will help mitigate these costs, we need to be sensitive to the fact that post-COVID, the entire dry cleaning industry may take years to get their feet back under them. The absolute last thing we would want is for a PERC ban coupled without some sort of financial help that would lead to other dry cleaners being forced out of business. We will continue to work with the authors on this bill. In addition, we hope we can continue to work to resolve the remaining issues with our registration fees continuing to increase every year. Many dry cleaners are having a hard time meeting their obligations and the fees in the past. And with our revenue down so much since COVID, many more are not even able to pay their registration fees this year. Some are terrified, afraid. I've had multiple conversations with some of these dry cleaners asking, am I going to be put in jail because I can't pay my taxes and my fees right now? As dry cleaners go out of business, the burden will continue to increase on the remaining dry cleaners if a long-term solution cannot be found. We want to thank Representative Hansen and Representative Eklund as authors on our bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Auni. Next on the list is Kirk Kadalka from the MPCA. You can identify yourself for the record.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Kirk Kadalka. I'm Assistant Commissioner with the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency. I work on land issues, which include our cleanup programs. So thank you for the opportunity to testify today. Wanted to thank the authors too for the bill. There are some good provisions in here, and there is one I'll highlight towards the end here that we do have some concerns with. But as mentioned by the Dry Cleaner Association, the prioritization of reimbursements going out to those operators who have paid the fees and not others that are eligible is something that we believe is a good thing. And just to give an example and talk about this in a little bit more on why that has a direct benefit to dry clean operators, is about 70 to 80% of the reimbursement requests we get in are from non-operators. They're from others that are eligible for the fund. And usually these are building owners, strip mall owners, property management companies, and not actually the dry cleaner that pays in. And so right now we have $620,000 in reimbursement requests. So what happens is the applicant does the cleanup, and then they seek a reimbursement through the agency from allowable expenses and turn in their invoices and that, and we make that reimbursement. Right now it's based on a first come, first serve. Of that 620,000, right now, just shy of 200,000 are for those that are operating dry cleaners. The rest are for those owners or property management companies that we talked about that actually lease the dry cleaners. Right now in the account, in the dry cleaner account, is $213,000. So we have enough right now. By passing that first provision, we would be able to complete all the reimbursements that are allowable under the law for those dry cleaners. And so that's a good piece. And because of that, that's why we don't believe the $255,000 that are right now set aside coming from the remediation fund to go to the dry cleaning account is needed. If our goal is to really address those who are paying in the fee, help them get their reimbursements, the language in the bill already does that instead of applying additional dollars there. For those that have been around before, as we mentioned, there are some larger concerns and problems with the dry cleaner account. It is not a solvent fund. It creates these long backlogs of reimbursements. The fees are not based on the ability to pay, and there are changes there that could be done and a number of other problems. But we believe before taking money and putting it into the account and taking it from other worthy projects, that we should have that long-term fix in place, because otherwise we will just keep having to come back and do that transfer of money. And right now the remediation fund is used for funding those locations where there's not a responsible party. There is no one else to do the investigation in neighborhoods or put a treatment system or drinking water system in someone's home. The remediation fund is used by the agency to do that type of work. And so we do always want to keep that protected for that use. So with that, I would like to just reiterate that we do support those provisions on the prioritization, and we actually think that gets to the goal that the chair, Representative Hansen, has put forward to get the dry cleaners to have their reimbursements done in a very timely fashion with the available dollars, and additional resources are not needed at this time. Thank you very much, Chair and committee members.
Thank you, Commissioner Kudelka. Chair Hansen, did you want to do the amendment now? Do you want questions? What's your preferred process here?
There may be members that have questions. I think that would help clarify things, because we have different moving pieces in this, and I think the more questions about that, the better it may be. So if there are members that have questions, I would defer to them.
Okay, all right, we'll take member questions. I see Representative Heinzman has a question.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe Commissioner Kudelka could clarify a little bit. Not totally clear on this $213,000 is in the dry cleaner account. And the clarification I'm looking for specifically is if that money is there and available, is there anything that prevented MPCA from working with the dry cleaners and distributing that in this effort? Is the language in the bill what specifically needed to be passed in order to get that out the door to the dry cleaners? Maybe, like I say, I could use some clarification. Why hasn't it been used previous to this legislation being passed?
Commissioner Kudelka.
Chair and committee members, thank you for the question. The money comes into the account, and on a revolving basis, we then make those reimbursements. $213,000 is just what we have right now. We do it periodically when we have enough to be able to cover claims. These claims can be up to $100,000 at a time. If we were to follow current law, it would go to those who first come in, and many of those are property owners and not the dry cleaners. What Representative Hansen's bill does is put those dry cleaners, the operators who run the systems and who've paid the fees in, puts them earlier in the line. So the money will go to them first. Now, we can hold off making reimbursements for a little bit for legislation to pass, but we do that on a rolling basis. So if this bill is not passed or enacted soon, that money has to go back out to those on the list, and that's going to go to others that are not the operators, the owner operators. Some of them who've actually just owned a property where a dry cleaner was for a month is one of those on there instead of those who've paid it.
Representative Heinzen, did you have a follow-up?
Yes, I did. Thank you, Madam Chair. And here again, maybe Commissioner Kudelka could help me out. Obviously, there are some real challenges here. And with the declining number of dry cleaners out there, the dollars coming into the account are continuing to be a problem as it's distributed, at least the cost is distributed amongst fewer dry cleaners. Does MPCA at this time have a plan to try and resolve those issues with the dollars coming in? Because we're going to run these folks right completely into the ground. They're going to be out of business. And then we're going to be looking for money to try and solve these problems outside of the current formula anyway. So, I mean, it seems like this has been an ongoing issue for a long time. Maybe you could remind the members, if you've had a plan, what it was, and if you don't or haven't had previously, what are the best solutions in your mind going forward?
Commissioner Kudelka.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. We do have a number of ideas. We have shared with the dry cleaner associations and a number of legislators about 8 or 9 different ideas because there are different ways. There is not a silver bullet to this. There is, as you mentioned, Representative, $650,000 each year coming into the account by statute. That is less than the expenditures. But for instance, one example is to eliminate some of those that are eligible, especially those that are not paying the fee, the dry cleaner operators. Instead, those property management companies and that. Representative Hansen's bill gets us a good way there by prioritizing that, but that would be one way to do it. We have some other ideas too. We'd be happy to meet with you to go over with them in some more detail. You are correct. There are accounts like this in other states, and they have closed or stopped taking applications for this very reason. The expenditures are far exceeding the amount of revenues coming in. So we think there's a mix between potential increases in revenue or cost sharing or eliminating some of those folks that are eligible for the projects. Those that would be eliminated, they would be doing the cleanups anyways to help their development in that. This was really focused to help dry cleaners collectively pay those costs, but those that are eligible are much more than the dry cleaner operators, and we think that's a way to do it.
Representative Heinzman, did you have any follow-up to that?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I may have some more questions later, but just a quick comment. I just want to thank Chair Hansen for working on this. We've been talking about a solution over the last 24 hours. And I understand that there may be some disagreement amongst some from the agency and the dry cleaners. And we're going to be working through those problems over the course of the session. But the sooner we get something rolling and the conversation started, the better. So just thank you, Mr. Chair, for having this issue brought up today.
Next up, I have Representative Keeler and then Representative Backer. Representative Keeler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just have a question. It's just a clarifying question because I'm just trying to understand all the fees here. You talked about some of your dry cleaners don't even have enough to pay their registration fees. What is the registration fee and what does that do to their business if they can't pay that this year? Is that creating an issue that some of our dry cleaners might be closing because of a registration fee? Or can you explain that to me a little bit more?
I don't know if Mr. Oni or Mr. Kudelka wants to take that one, but.
Madam Chair, I can take that.
Okay.
This is Keith Downey. Thank you. Thank you for the question, Representative. Basically, every year, everybody who is a dry cleaner in the state of Minnesota that uses a dry cleaning machine has to pay one of 3 different levels of fees based on their full-time equivalencies. And the problem that we have, obviously, is when this bill was written, 25, 30 years ago, there was 350 of us paying into this, and now we're down under 100. So we have to make up $650,000 somehow, according to statute. So those fees every year keep going up as we lose more and more dry cleaners. Obviously, in the past couple of years, it's been more and more difficult as those fees have increased. But post-COVID, when we have a lot of work from home environments and people aren't back to work yet, obviously, we don't have the pieces coming in. So many of these businesses are making the tough decision right now. Do they pay that registration fee and not pay their electricity or their employees? So they take a gamble because they've used up all of their either savings, their retirement, their PPP money, whatever other grants they can have. And there's just too many holes in the ship to keep the thing afloat. So they say, well, I may not pay that registration fee now and live with the repercussions later. And just for the hopes that I can keep my doors open for another week, month, 2 months in order to get revenue in, and then try to throw myself at the mercy of the court. Thank you, Representative, for the question.
Representative Keeler, did you have any follow-up?
I do. I guess that didn't necessarily answer my question of the dollar amount that if I'm a dry cleaner, what is my registration fee obligation this year with the decline in businesses? Like, that's what I'm trying to figure out, just in the dollar amount, what that could be.
Thank you for the question, Representative Madam Chair. Right now, the three levels of fees that they may have to pay. So if you're a smaller dry cleaner, you'll pay anywhere, I believe it's around $4,200 to $4,400 a year. A mid-sized dry cleaner would pay around $8,000 a year, and a larger dry cleaner may pay around $16,000 to $17,000 a year. And we're projecting that that number is going to go up by about 20% by next year, just because of all the dry cleaners that are going out of business.
Representative Keeler, did you have any other follow-up on that?
I do, but that's fine. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We'll go to Representative Backer and then Representative Lewick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And just like Representative Heisman, I do want to thank the chair for working on this. These businesses are small businesses, and that's such a vital importance to our economy here in Minnesota. My question is, and this is coming from memory, so if I'm incorrect, I don't know if this goes to chair or MPCA or who, but last year when we talked about this, instead of 255,000, weren't we looking at closer to 650, 660,000 to help the dry cleaners? What happened to that? The 400,000, or why did that get changed? I'm in the camp that we should beef up this fund to that level. So I don't know who can answer that question.
Madam Chair.
Chair Hansen, go ahead.
So in the fiscal year 19, we had appropriated 600,000 for reimbursement, and that, Representative Backer, you may remember there were people who had maybe done the expense and had not been reimbursed for up to 3 years. So the Pollution Control Agency, and I know they have a list of who received those reimbursements for that first 600,000. A second 600,000 in FY20 was to go for a legal analysis, because there was an attempt to try to bring the parties together to have what Commissioner Kudelka said, try to find a long-term solution. And one of the possibilities was to look at whether old insurance policies could help with that. So doing a forensic legal analysis on insurance policies, that was appropriated $600,000. Of that $600,000, that's what I would, prior to today, it was my understanding there was zero in the current dry cleaner account, and that there would be 255,000 left over unspent from the forensic study, the legal study on insurance policies. So what I'm trying to do when we get to the amendment, I was hoping to take that 255 and spend that on the dry cleaners, on the operators. We have since received the information that there's $213 in the dry cleaner account that could go and be prioritized to the operators. So that 255, if that that's in an FY19 appropriation that expires on June 30th of this year. So if that is not used, then it goes back into the remediation fund. And so that's where you see those extra dollars. So there was about $350K spent on a legal analysis, and it would be my intent to capture that. It was my intent to capture that for paying that backlog, that continuing backlog for reimbursement for owner operators. If there are sufficient funds to make sure, if this bill passed and we can pay that with existing funds, then it would be my intent that that 255 go into cost share for the dry cleaners to help reduce PERC in the future by getting the transition for the equipment. And Commissioner Kudelka could maybe clarify if I made any errors there, but I think that's accurate.
Okay.
Representative Backer, did you have any follow-up? Other
Yeah,
questions?
Madam Chair, I do appreciate that, Chair Hansen. Thank you. This goes to the Commissioner. What is being done right now? Is there a lot of, the word "a lot" is maybe not the best choice, but what type of investigation or what type of work's being done with additional sites throughout the state? Is there a lot of work that's being, folks looking for other potential little sites with dry cleaners that we have to do some, cleanup and so forth? Is MPCA aggressively or moderately looking for these other sites or businesses that there has to be this additional investment for cleanup?
Commissioner Kudelka.
Thank you, Chair and committee members. It's a good question. Many dry cleaners are more urban areas that have municipal water. So when we had contamination plumes, it was not someone had a well there. And so while there was work to do cleanup, it was a lower cost. About 10 years ago, we found out those plumes actually not only have a potential to impact people's drinking water from a well, but we've learned about soil vapor intrusion, which is these volatile organic compounds such as PERC volatilize, and they work their way up into people's homes and present air quality issues. And that's where we've now had to go back and look at all the different sites, and that's where we're seeing the risk. We're seeing homes that are built around dry cleaners that may not even be there anymore, or dry cleaners that are operating, that there are these plumes that we knew were down there, or but now we have more concern because of their impact into people's homes. That requires more investigation, more cleanup, and it requires vapor mitigation systems to be installed in a home. So you may be familiar with a radon mitigation system, same type of technology, creating a vacuum underneath the home. And that is what needs to be done to protect homeowners, or if it's in a commercial business, for instance, a strip mall or some other type of business, to protect the occupants, the dry cleaners themselves, or someone who may be in there, whether it's a hardware store next to them, hair salon, or a childcare facility. It's to protect those folks from soil vapors. So soil vapors intrusion has brought on more cost for these cleanups than what were there 10 years ago.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner. Appreciate that. Thank you. That's all I have right now, Madam Chair.
All right, Representative Lewick, you're next, and then Representative Green.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I guess this is more of a comment than a question. It would seem, first of all, it would make sense that 255,000 that didn't go to the trial lawyers or whatever you want to call, that legal analysis would go back into the dry cleaner fund and then be made available for dealing with operating dry cleaners. I think in the big picture of things, those legacy issues that are out there that Commissioner Kudelka talked about need to be moved over to that general mediation fund because there just ain't enough horses in the barn here to resolve those legacy issues with the dry cleaning industry that exists today. So it would seem and that's not exactly what Chair Hansen's amendment would do, but we have trouble keeping that fund
where it's supposed to be. So why wouldn't we put the 255,000 in on top of the 213 and get that out to operating dry cleaners? And everybody is going to have to live with where they fit in the pecking order on the general remediation issue, which is a much more general, broader effort to remediate these sites out there. So that's just a general comment. I don't know if Chair Hansen's going to actually introduce his amendment, but it would seem that it would make sense to take that 255 and add it to the 213 and get on with directly aiding the dry cleaners right now. If we need additional legislation to make that hard switch and put that other category of legacy stuff into a different funding situation, we're probably way overdue to get that done. So that's just a general comment. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Green, you're up next.
Madam Chair, a question for Commissioner Kudelka. Commissioner, we hear a lot about all these sites that are that you're finding new evidence of more problems. What kind of a backlog do you have right now on these sites?
Commissioner Kudelka.
Excuse me, I've heard the word backlog be used, and I'd like to find out what you're looking at there.
Commissioner Kudelka.
Chair and committee members, there's a couple. We talked about the dry cleaner fund and the applications in for reimbursement. There's a backlog there, and that's where we've had most of our conversations. There are many sites out there the agency is going back, and because of soil vapor intrusion, looking at to see if we looked at them for drinking water issues, if now there are soil vapor issues. So we do have efforts to do that with the legislature's help. Last year, or excuse me, 2 years ago, we were able to get more staff to do that, and we're going through that list whether to do the work. Now, the underlying foundation of how our cleanup programs work, Superfund and that, is the polluter pays. So we do go back to the responsible party to do that type of cleanup work, but we do the initial investigation to see if there's an issue and whether they need to be pulled into the piece. Only in the case where there is no responsible party, someone's long gone, that's when the state is able to come in and cover those costs. And so there are sites out there that we take on the first risk, which is human health. And if there's direct exposures, we'll take care of that. And then we do have a backlog of then getting to a number of sites to be able to do the actual cleanup. And just alone those sites where there's not a potential responsible party or there's orphan sites is what the remediation fund is for. There is not enough money to cover those others where there are responsible parties there to be able to do the work, whether it's a dry cleaner, a plating company, large or small businesses. The concern is if we start doing it for one of them, we're breaking that underlying foundation of the Superfund program, and everyone is going to want the state to clean up the contamination that they created. So our backlog are in a couple of places. It's on those orphan sites we're working on, the reimbursements, and then also just double checking on some of these sites if responsible parties need to do more work because of soil vapors, because we want to make sure we're protecting those that live near there.
Representative Green, did you have any follow-up questions?
Yes, Madam Chair. I don't know if I got an answer as to how many. It sounds like there's just some out there. One of my concerns is that we're not really dealing with this problem in a substantial way, and the state is going to end up cleaning this up. Commissioner, you made the comment that you didn't want to single out one. Well, if we don't do something pretty soon, there may not be any left. Just in the last few years, if it sounds like we've gone from 300 and some down to just over 100 or somewhere between 1 and 200, that's a pretty substantial drop. And so I don't know if putting this off any longer is really to anyone's benefit. Not only the dry cleaners are suffering here, but the people who are having to deal with this problem are suffering. And so I think that this bill is probably a little overdue as it is. And is there any talk about maybe capping these fees to the dry cleaners so that we don't continue to raise this cost on them in a business that's already hurting and shrinking at the same time? Commissioner
Commissioner Kudelka.
Chair and committee members, thank you for the question. There are a number of different areas for the number of sites for reimbursement. I can maybe tell you what that number is, but our larger investigations, we're looking at hundreds of different sites to go back and doing it. So I don't have a number in front of you. Sorry about that. You're correct. I did not get to that piece. We agree change needs to be done. And that's why we've put together 8 to 9 different ideas to choose from to make those changes, to really direct the money to the dry cleaners that are paying the fees, going to the operators and not the whole host of other people that are eligible under the statute. The way to do that is to change it and make them not eligible, to direct those resources that are coming in the fees to go to those operators. We think that's a way to do it. And there's other ways to make a fairer system for those that are doing the good work and not having to carry the burden of others. So I think we agree on that, and those changes need to be made. In terms of the fee caps, the statute says that the fees amount collected is only $650,000. So that is capped by the law already. Only that much can be collected each year in total fees.
Representative Green?
Well, then just to comment, maybe before we get too far in this committee could change the statute, because when you're looking at just over 100 dry cleaners, the 650,000 is going to end up being an enormous amount. And so we maybe have to start looking at that cap. But in the meantime, for right now, I think that it's probably pretty prudent that we get this bill passed. So thank you.
Any further member questions?
Madam Chair.
I see Representative Heinzman has raised his hand. Representative Heinzman, do you want to go ahead?
Sorry, it's a little slow there, Madam Chair, to hit the button, but this is actually for Chair Hansen. Could you maybe just briefly talk about the possibility of working to cap the fees like Representative Green was mentioning, except to cap them so that each individual business wasn't being so massively affected? We had briefly discussed it, and I know that there's talk about that from the Senate side. Just if you could just rush on that for a minute, that'd be great, Mr. Chair.
Chair Hansen?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Heinzman. What I'm attempting to do here is to salvage some part of the existing fiscal year's appropriations. Soon the governor's budget will be coming forward, and we will be taking up that. I commit to you and to the PCA and to the Dry Cleaners Association and members that we are going to continue to have this conversation of how do we try to resolve this in the long run, because right now it's a death spiral where fewer and fewer have to pay more and more, and it doesn't work. So we know it doesn't work. But we've got to find some way. That may include a cap, that may include other things of trying to resolve this. That's why I'm asking for your support for this bill, and I will move the amendment with a little bit of a modification, because it's dealing with this fiscal year, where if we can get the reimbursement, that takes a debt off of existing dry cleaners. It also, if we can provide them with transitioning off, that prevents future contamination. And then having that ban, the amendment will move that farther out. But if we can get them transitioning off of PERC, that prevents continuing to dig the hole on contamination by having more contamination. And this, and I called it perchlorate, it's perchloroethylene, is a very nasty chemical, very nasty. And if we can reduce that use and then eventually eliminate it, that helps us out. So this package is not what it was 8 months ago. It's not what I wish it was, but it's the best we can get right now. And there's still disagreement about it. But I would work to continue on this, and would invite all members of the committee to try to figure out, if we can work together in the long run on this. This will just be one larger part of the budget, because the Dry Cleaner Fund and the Remediation Fund are not going to be solvent without some engagement. I don't know if that's what you're looking for, Representative Heinzman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Representative Heinzman, did you have any follow-up or are you good?
I was just going to thank the chair for that answer.
All right, Chair Hansen, did you want to move the A2 amendment?
I would like to move the A2 amendment, and maybe if staff can help. I think on the first A where it talks, I think we need to clarify that 255 is coming from the unused existing appropriation. Maybe that takes citing. I would move the A2 amendment, Madam Chair.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Eloff?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been trying to follow the discussion, and if I have successfully, I have maybe a suggestion as to how to proceed with amending or changing the A2 amendment, if I can present that and see if people like it. Looking at the amendment now, on page 1, line 10, delete 255,000 and insert 213,000. Page 1, line 17, delete fiscal year 2021 is appropriated from the Remediation Fund 2 and insert I'm gonna have to go off screen for a second here. I just wrote it down. Oops. Trying to find it. Okay. Sorry. Well, let me just read it then. So again, page 1, line 17, delete fiscal year 2021 is appropriated from the Remediation Fund 2 and insert unexpended funds from the transfer made under Laws 2019, First Special Session, Chapter 4, Article 1, Section 2, Subdivision 10, Paragraph C, shall be expended by. And then finally, page 1, line 22, delete the words, this is a one-time appropriation and insert the money made available under this paragraph.
I would incorporate those changes into the A2 amendment. Members, I know this is in Zoom land here. I would ask Mr. Eloff to state that again and just to make sure it's clear.
Yes. On the amendment, on the A2 amendment, page 1, line 10, delete 255,000 and insert 213,000. Page 1, line 17, delete fiscal year 2021 is appropriated from the Remediation Fund 2 and insert unexpended funds from the transfer made under Laws 2019, First Special Session, Chapter 4, Article 1, Section 2, Subdivision 10, Paragraph C, shall be expended by. And then page 1, line 22, delete, this is a one-time appropriation and insert the money made available under this paragraph. So what's being done in paragraph B there is removing the appropriation from the remediation fund and substituting the unexpended money that's left over from the 600,000.
That is my intent, members.
All right, so we're going to Representative Hansen has moved the A2 amendment, and are we going to say as amended to that A2 amendment?
Mr. Eliff, what would be the appropriate if I've incorporated those changes?
I'd still call it an oral amendment.
Okay. So do we want to vote on the oral amendment first and then the entire amendment? Is that the protocol?
It can just be incorporated, or you can do it in 2 steps.
All right, so we'll incorporate that oral amendment into the A2 amendment that Representative Hansen is moving. Is there any other discussion on that A2 amendment with that oral amendment included? I don't see any hands raised or anything, so let's take the roll on the A2 amendment.
Hansen, Rick.
Hansen, Rick, aye.
Hansen, aye. Wozlowick, Amy.
Wozlowick, aye.
Wozlowick, aye. Heinzman, Josh.
Heitzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Acomb, Patty.
Acomb, aye.
Acomb, aye. Ackland, Susan.
Ackland, aye.
Ackland, aye. Backer, Jeff.
Backer, aye.
Backer, aye. Becker, Finn, Jamie.
Becker, Finn, aye.
Becker, Finn, aye. Eklund, Rob.
Eklund, aye.
Eklund, aye. Fisher, Peter.
Fisher, aye.
Fisher, aye. Green, Steve.
Green, aye.
Green, aye. Igo, Spencer.
Igo, aye.
Igo, aye. Jordan, Sydney.
Jordan, aye.
Jordan, aye. Keeler, Heather.
Keeler, aye.
Keeler, aye. Lee, Fu.
Lee, aye.
Lee, aye. Lippert, Todd.
Lippert, aye.
Lippert, aye. Lewick, Dale.
Lewick, aye.
Lewick, aye. Morrison, Kelly.
Morrison, aye.
Nelson, Nathan.
Nelson, aye.
Nelson, aye. Tice, Tama.
Tice, aye.
Tice, aye. 19 ayes and 0 nays.
All right, the motion prevails that the A2 amendment is adopted. Representative Hansen, I know we've already sort of gone through the discussion of the bill. Any final questions on this, or Chair Hansen, any final remarks on the bill as amended?
Thank you, members. I know this is there's going to continue to be more information that likely will come as the governor's budget comes, but I believe this is an important bipartisan step to try to resolve problems both for the environment and then for small business. So I appreciate your support on the amendment, and I would ask for your support on passing the bill. I would renew my motion that House File, I got a call right in the middle of that.
Representative Hansen renews his motion that House File 91, as amended, be recommended to be re-referred to Ways and Means. The clerk will take the roll on the motion.
Hanson, Rick.
Hansen, Rick, aye.
Hanson, aye. Wozlowick, Amy.
It's
Wozlowick, aye.
39.98 when you do that. Yeah.
Wozlowick, Amy.
Wozlowick, aye.
Wozlowick, aye. Heinzman, Josh.
Heitzman, aye.
Heinzman, aye. Acomb, Patty.
Acomb, aye.
Acomb, aye. Ackland, Susan.
Ackland, aye.
Ackland, aye. Backer, Jeff.
Backer, aye.
Backer, aye. Becker,
Yeah.
Finn, Jamie.
Becker, Finn, aye.
Eklund, Rob.
Aye. Eklund, aye.
Eklund, aye. Fisher, Peter.
Fisher, aye.
Fisher, aye. Green, Steve.
Green, aye.
Green, aye. Igo, Spencer.
Igo, aye.
Igo, aye. Jordan, Sydney.
Jordan, aye.
Jordan, aye. Keeler, Heather.
Keeler, aye.
Keeler, aye. Lee, Fu.
Lee, aye.
Lee, aye. Lippert, Todd.
Lippert, aye.
Lippert, aye. Lewick, Dale.
Lewick, aye.
Lewick, aye. Morrison, Kelly.
Morrison, aye.
Morrison, aye. Nelson, Nathan.
Nelson, I.
Nelson, I. Tice, Tama.
Tice, aye.
Tice, I. That is 19 ayes and 0 nays.
The motion prevails and House File 91 as amended is on its way to Ways and Means.